Hello and welcome to Greens Rising, the Green Party North East's podcast for people who want real hope and real change. I'm your host, Ynez Tulsen. I'm a singer, podcaster and, full disclosure, a Green Party member. In this episode, we're meeting Dr. Sarah Peters, the Green Party's candidate in the upcoming by-election on August the 14th for Newcastle City Council's South Jesmond ward. Sarah's not only a proud resident of the ward, she also works as a junior doctor, now called resident doctor, for the NHS here in Newcastle. We talk about what drives her, the challenges she sees on the ground, and why community matters now more than ever. So if you're feeling politically homeless or unsure how to vote, this episode could be just for you. Sarah, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and what led you to medicine?
Sure. I live in Newcastle in South Jesmond, where I work as a junior doctor. I really love my job. It's such a privilege and also really fun as well. I grew up in London. I'm a proud adopted Geordie. I think that what drew me to medicine is loving that mix of science and wanting to understand how the world works, but also wanting to have a job that involves interacting with people and meeting new people and learning about people as well.
What would you say that your job as a doctor has shown you about the challenges that people are facing today, especially locally?
I think you do see people at some of the hardest times in their life. And my experience over the last few years has really shown how underfunded our public services are. Understaffing and difficulties getting patients home because there isn't enough social care to go round. And also the reasons that patients are coming in the first place, difficulties with addiction or alcohol misuse and the long-term impacts of that as well. And also issues with heating their homes properly, particularly in winter, particularly older patients sometimes can become much more unwell as a result of those difficulties. For me, that makes it really hard to understand why the current government is supporting cutting winter fuel payments for pensioners, because I just feel like there's so much that needs to be done to better support working people and the whole range of our population.
What was it that initially drew you to the Green Party? Was there a particular moment or something that just clicked for you?
I originally was very interested in climate activism, and that was a big part of my life, and particularly around sustainability and healthcare. So that was what initially drew me to the party. But then the longer I've stayed in the party, the more you realise that actually the climate crisis is linked to so many other social and economic and racial injustices. And what's kept me in the Green Party as well is both our success, but also our focus on positive policy. Fairly shortly after I joined, we successfully campaigned to get Nick Hartley elected in Byker and Khaled Musharraf elected in Elsick. And that felt like a really purposeful, positive story to be part of. And it feels like the direction is only up from here, essentially. And then in terms of our positivity and pushing for positive change, I think that there's so much that's dragging people down at the moment. I think years of austerity and cuts have just really made people's lives very difficult. And I think that what we really need is some real hope and some real change. And things that people can actually see, this is how things could be better. And actually, there's a party who will stand up for that. And I think that the key part of that is that in the Green Party, we are ordinary people in our communities who want to make a difference and stand up for people and the planet. And that's really what's kept me in the party.
So if somebody's undecided about which way to vote, what would you say is the advantage of voting Green?
The first thing in this by-election is that I am a local resident. I live in the ward and I really care about the local area. I love where I live. And I feel like living here, you have that lived experience of what the issues are. On the doorstep, I'm hearing a lot about the bins and the issues with littering in the back lanes. And I can totally relate to that because I also struggle with issues of the bins overflowing and being contaminated. I totally understand where people are coming from. So I think there's that. And then I think the second thing that's really important to talk about with the Green Party is that we're the only mainstream party that isn't whipped. And that basically means that I'm not told how to vote by the central party. And so I think that really in voting Green in this by-election, people have a real chance to vote for somebody who's independent, to speak up for them and is a real local representative. We have a very strong background of policy that's been developed over decades that really prioritises people and the planet. But a huge amount of our policy making is also about listening to local people and understanding that decisions are best made closest to the problem. So in terms of each individual vote, whether I'm going to be pushed one way or the other, I have a lot more freedom to decide and to actually take into account all the views of residents that I've heard.
You've been out on the doorstep talking to people and finding out what their issues are. What have you learned through that process?
There's a lot of uncertainty in politics at the moment. I feel like there's a lot of people who are feeling quite politically homeless, who have particularly voted Labour for most of their lives and now feel that that no longer represents their beliefs and no longer stands for their interests. So I think there's been a lot of trying to communicate to people and reassure people that I am here to stand up for them and that's what they will get if they vote for me. Then there are also some quite specific local issues as well. There was a recent article about rats in the back lanes in South Jesmond, which, nobody wants to live in an area with a rat problem. And I think that there are really tangible things that we can do to help address this problem. And then zooming out maybe a little bit more, I think there's a kind of underlying discontent between the student and non-student residents in the ward for a broad variety of reasons. And obviously that's leading to difficulties within the community. And those are two key issues that keep on coming up on the doorstep.
So specifically with regard to those two issues, how would you actually go about addressing some of those?
The thing that I feel could be done differently in this ward to make a real difference is trying to build more of a sense of community in South Jesmond. And I think that's going to be a big challenge, but I'm really excited about what we could do together. And I think one of the first principles is, as I said, listening to people and also understanding how different people's schedules are different. Meetings that a student might be able to come to might be far too late at night for somebody who's got young children. And so it's really about understanding how we can engage with all the members of the South Jesmond population to make sure that everybody feels heard and represented. And I think once you've brought people together, got them to do some things to help maintain their community together, really help to bring a sense of collective community responsibility and also get people to meet each other and know their neighbours, which I think is really important. And then when you've got that solid base of community cohesion, then you can actually start to think about the solutions. What's also really important is making sure that when individual residents raise things with you, that those individual things are focused on and fixed properly, and that residents can see that you're focused on the details as well as the wider vision.
You live in South Jesmond and you're a resident there and have been for some years. So what do you feel personally as a resident has been missing to create that community cohesion or to be able to clean up the environment?
I think a big part of it is underfunding. So for instance, in Sandyford, we've had a communal bin system for several years. And I think when it was first brought in, it was very much seen as a solution to the problem. But now it's no longer a solution. People feel very discontented with it because it's not working. And I feel like a big part of that problem is that bin collections are not often enough. There aren't enough bins. We don't have street sweepers or anything in the area at all. And having a bigger population than this infrastructure was designed for. And so I think we have to be thinking about ways to increase that infrastructure to support the people who are living here now.
Do you hold the powers as a councillor to be able to influence those things?
Definitely. You have a lot more contacts with a whole range of people who can help you with all of those things. So with officers in the council, with your fellow councillors in the ward, and obviously in the Green Party, we've just have such an amazing support from huge numbers of activists who often volunteer a lot of their expertise and time to help us solve problems. You can very legitimately ask, what's one councillor going to do? I'm going to be the only Green councillor for the ward, one of 3 on Newcastle City Council if I'm elected. But I think that what Nick Hartley and Khalid Musharraf have shown is that actually even one councillor can make a huge difference. And I think a real success for us over the last year has been the story of the district heating system in Byker. So in the Byker estate, the residents were paying 40% above the energy price cap on their bills as part of the district heating network. And supported and coordinated by Councillor Nick Hartley along with a large group of Byker residents, they managed to campaign really successfully and ended up not only having their bills reduced back to the energy price cap limit, but actually having refunds of up to £700 given to residents to refund them for the money that they'd paid in the past. And so I think that actually when you have committed local people who are willing to truly represent the residents that live in the ward that they represent, that actually you can achieve a huge amount that makes a real difference to people's lives.
Circling back to you a little bit more, what would you say are the values that you try to live by in your personal life, your professional life?
Yeah, so I think particularly growing up, my parents instilled in me quite strongly ideas of honesty and integrity and doing what you say you're going to do and speaking the truth. And I think that those carry you a very long way through public life. And I think that that is definitely the sort of ethics that I feel need to be throughout politics and certainly in my political career as well. I also think that we do have a duty to make the world a better place than it was for those before us, and also that it is currently for those here now. That sort of feeling of duty and drive is really important to me as well. And
so with some of those values, what led you to decide to stand at this by-election on August the 14th?
Yeah, definitely. I am a South Jesmond resident. I've stood in the ward before and I know the area very well. And as I said, care about it a lot. And there's a real chance that we could get a Green elected here as well. And so it felt like a real opportunity. And we felt that in the face of all the difficulties that people are facing nationally, locally, internationally, it just felt like a really important thing to give it our best shot and try and get more Green voices on Newcastle City Council and try and push for the changes that we need in our society.
So Sarah, if the Green Party had more power locally, what do you think people would start to feel changing around them?
I would hope for more kind of community cohesion. And I guess how individual people would feel that would be hopefully feeling more secure, safer in their communities, more accepted, knowing your neighbours, feeling like you've got people to rely on. And we talked a little bit before about how I might start to go about doing that. But I really would hope that if we're successful with some of these community building ideas, that people would be able to rely on the people in their street and neighbourhood a little bit more and know that they've got people who they could go and ask for some pasta if they've forgotten to get it at the shop, if something's broken. And there have been some really good case studies from elsewhere in the country and in the world of where actually different demographics within communities can really support each other. So having older people and university students living together and actually seeing that can work really well. We've got the ingredients in South Jesmond, and I wonder if we could sort of push a bit more towards this mutual benefit and that kind of thing.
What would you say to somebody who's never voted Green before?
What are you waiting for? There's never been a more important time to vote Green. The climate crisis needs us to make the right decision. People from marginalised communities need us to make the right decision. Our underfunded public services need us to make the right decisions. It is so urgent that we get the right people in power who are willing to bring hopeful change to our society now. When you vote Green, you're voting for community voices and for local representation and for more power for people and for yourself. So it really is about going further than the ballot box and actually voting for a community where you will feel more included and more empowered.
If somebody's not familiar with the way that the Green Party operate, could you just explain to us why it's different to the mainstream parties?
The sort of overlying principle is that it is a party that doesn't have a hierarchy, what we call a flat structure. So the idea is that somebody might have a role such as a local party coordinator or the party leader or whatever, and they take on that responsibility and all of the things that come with that. But that doesn't mean that their voice is any more valuable when it actually comes to deciding a policy at conference. It's one member, one vote, regardless of whether it's me or another member or the party leader. Everyone gets the same number of votes. All of our policy is decided by members at conference. And that is then the party policy that is carried forward. So it doesn't matter who the leader is or who any of the other positions are in the party. They're not going to change what our party policy is because our party policy is run by our members. So if you want to be involved in shaping truly grassroots policy, then do join the Green Party because, it's a fab place to be.
How do you think that's going to influence your style of representation?
So I think very much trying to take the approach of everybody is an expert in the local community. You're an expert about where you live. And I think that hearing from people and really listening, because I live in one part of the ward and so I have some lived experience, but also that doesn't mean that I know what the priorities are in the other side of the ward. And I think just having that humility to listen and to listen to what residents are telling you they think the solutions are as well. Already on the doorstep, I've had lots of people telling me about how they think that we could reduce the traffic flow through residential streets and all the rest of it. People have the solutions for their local area. And I think that sometimes listening to your community gets confused with not having ideas of your own and not having a vision and a drive forward. And I very much do have a vision of how I want the community to look and feel. But I think that you have to bring people with you. And a huge amount of that is about listening to people and what their priorities are and learning how you can meld your two visions together, essentially.
What is your vision for South Jesmond?
So we've talked a lot about community cohesion and how it would feel to be in the community. So I won't go over that again, but I guess in terms of maybe more visual changes to the community, I think the first thing is the communal bins. Clearing that up and making it more presentable is the first thing in terms of adding things to the community. I think one thing would be to prioritise active travel within the ward. On a very basic level, it means making sure that pavements don't have broken slabs sort of jutting out for people to trip over or wheelchairs not to be able to get past. It means having drop curbs. It also means having enough bike racks, particularly near our local businesses. So actually there are several sort of small rows of shops within the ward where there aren't bike racks outside them. So people cycling to try and buy stuff from those shops have to attach their bike to a lamppost or just leave it outside unlocked, or that dissuades people from cycling because they think my bike's not going to be safe or it's going to just be an extra hassle. Making sure there are good bike lanes, and then also in the bigger roads making sure that there's good public transport connection. So it's all about trying to make it easy for people to make the right choices that are cleaner and greener and also better for their health as well. And then the final thing that would be really lovely is improving our green spaces and improving the biodiversity within the ward. That could be a number of different things, but trying to make sure that any communal green spaces, we have plenty of native wildflowers and things like that, and things that improve biodiversity, trying to encourage people to do more of that kind of thing in their own gardens as well. And also just teach people how to get involved with gardening and how to look after the plants in their community as well.
You've mentioned earlier that Newcastle City Council is desperately underfunded. So what are some practical ways that you as a Green councillor and the other Green councillors are able to instigate initiatives? So
it's a really good point because there is limited funding. So councillors do have a small amount of money that they can use to help fund local initiatives, but it is fairly limited. So I think a lot of it is about being wise with where you put that investment as well, and making sure that you're absolutely making the most of that for the community. But I think there are so many things that don't cost lots of money that can be done. Things around education, to go back to the bins, because it's a big issue with contamination of recycling and things like that. And actually, one thing that you can do is, just print a leaflet that turns into a poster that people can put on their fridge to remind them of what goes in each bin and things. And that's quite a small intervention, but actually could have quite a big impact. And then again, when you're holding a litter pick, that's a very cheap, low cost intervention that makes the street look better, but also helps people to take more responsibility, builds those community connections. So there's so much that can be done that doesn't cost much or doesn't cost anything, and actually can have a really big impact. Despite the constraints, I actually can't remember either of our current councillors talking about funds as a sort of thing that's constrained their individual ability to connect and make people's lives better in the ward. So much of the stories that they've been telling have been about how they have managed to make real change for people, even within the limited resources that they have.
And what are some of the most positive and powerful ways that they've done that? What have been some of the outcomes from those?
Lots of different things. I think the district heating system has been just an absolutely massive win for us and for local residents in Byker as well. But also when we look at Elsick and look at Khaled Musharraf's work, there's a big problem with back lane littering and fly tipping in Elsick as well. And he's really managed to take some action on that, get the community on board, get things cleared up. And that really helps people take pride in their community and feel more empowered, which I think shouldn't be underestimated and undervalued. Nick Hartley has this lovely story. A few days before the election where he was elected as councillor, a resident came up to him and said, "I've never voted before in my life, But I was so excited about the vision that you have for our area that I've registered to vote, and I'm going to vote for you. Nick and Coloured have done huge numbers of projects, and Nick proposed a motion to council, which was the first opposition motion to go through council unamended in a very long time. It's because of that positivity and that vision and that drive that then empowers people who weren't even engaged with politics and didn't see it as a positive thing, think, actually, this is something that's good for me, that's good for my community. And ultimately, I feel like I can get behind without the sort of dirtiness of politics and things, and actually seeing it can be a positive thing.
So what would you say to somebody who feels let down or cynical about politics?
Me too. That's why I've stayed involved in the Green Party. At the point I joined the Green Party, I was feeling incredibly depressed about how public services were being funded. The climate crisis was one thing that really pushed me to the Green Party, but my work in the NHS was another. And actually seeing day in, day out how underfunding impacts staff and patients relatives was actually quite heartbreaking in some cases. And I think that over the last few years, my work in the Green Party has allowed me to feel so much more hopeful about the future, and so much more hopeful that there is a good future for us if we can gain enough support and get into enough rooms to make the right decisions for communities.
What does give you hope?
Definitely other activists. I think that's a big thing. And I think their enthusiasm for this campaign, but also just more broadly for making the world better and brighter, is just incredible to see. And the connections with each other are just so important.
What are 3 things that you want people to know about you beyond the label of the candidate?
I think the first thing is that I'm just a woman trying to figure things out. I'm fallible like any other human. I will be honest with you, and also that I will work hard for you, and I will do my best for South Jesmond and the Green Party as well.
Where can people find you, follow your campaign, get involved?
I'm Sarah Peters on Facebook, and on Instagram, I'm sarahpeters.green. And then in terms of following Newcastle Green Party, you can find our website, which is newcastle-upon-tyne.greenparty.org.uk. Or you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and Blue Sky.
Dr. Sarah Peters, Green Party candidate for South Jesmond Ward. Is there anything else that you want to share with people?
No, just get out and vote Green.
Thank you for listening to Greens Rising, the podcast for people who want real hope and real change. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it along to a neighbour, a friend, or your local WhatsApp group. Be sure to like and subscribe on whichever platform you get your podcasts to make sure you get all the latest episodes. To get involved or stay in the loop, head to newcastle-upon-tyne.greenparty.org.uk. And if you live in South Jesmond, remember, vote Green on August the 14th.